A warm welcome to everyone. This is the OneSport OT07 and I'll talk about it in a moment. Let me take off my helmet. Well, this is actually the very first bike of the year, if I may interpret this particular machine that way, which in fact was sent here by Eric Octopus, my good buddy and collaborator over at OneSport. This is when companies typically begin sending out their new test bikes, and of course, as you might expect, that's the main reason they do it. Because people are also just now starting to think about whether they should buy a bike for the coming year. And this is OneSport's city offering, the OT07, which is a completely standard sized and relatively traditionally designed bicycle, just as you would expect to see right here in front of us. So this is a normal bike, and as you can see, it has 27-inch wheels. It's specifically designed for city use, and it's a step through, so to speak, meaning it doesn't have that central bar in the middle, which is also practical for OneSport because they were able to place the 10.4 amp hour battery right here. And it also has a 7-speed Shimano shifter. And what's important and what we like is that it has a torque sensor and a mid-drive motor. Right here in the middle is a Bafang mid-drive motor. And since the motor is Bafang, the controller is also Bafang. And our little onboard display is Bafang as well. So at first glance, I'd say this looks like a really pleasant city bike. It does have a price. They're asking €1,370 for it, which is not a small amount of money, as you might imagine. But if you have a coupon code, if someone's already interested in this bike, you can reduce the price by €100. But even then, it still won't be a cheap bike. So before we go any further, I'll bring the camera over here and we'll take a look at what this bike is made of, just for a moment. So let's start here at the handlebar grip. As usual, this time it's a pretty stylish and comfortable grip, kind of like faux stitched leather. So it's a bit funny, but it's not off-putting at all, honestly. Here we have this compact Bafang device, which actually has a convenient power button located right on the back. See, I'll just go ahead and turn it on now. And then the display comes to life. This is a monochrome display, so you don't have many settings available, but you can still adjust the level of assistance, and that's pretty much it. But honestly, it's definitely functional. Right now, there's a lot of light shining directly on it, but it's still actually quite visible, obviously, thanks to its little bluish backlight, which really helps. So it's visible in nighttime conditions. The hydraulic brake is perfectly fine. I barely had to make any adjustments during disassembly or reassembly. And here, of course, is the gear shifter component, which is a typical Shimano part. But on this particular occasion, it's not the Tourney system. It's actually a Shimano Altus, which, well, isn't exactly top tier either, but it's definitely a step up from what these manufacturers used to offer before. So we have a Shimano Altus 7-speed shifter. You won't shift it since you ride flat terrain. Details later. And right here in the middle is the Bafang mid-drive motor. You can see it's labeled as well, which is 250 watts and has 65 Newton meters of torque. And so as we go up here, you'll see that there's actually a keep. This is useful because if I turn it here, you can remove the battery. This is a high capacity 10.4 amp hour battery that's included in this particular device, which is part of this unit. And basically, OneSport says that range is 70 to 90 kilometers. We have a relatively simple front suspension, which is an air spring type thing. Nothing special, but for example, in general, it worked quite well on gravel roads. We have a front light that illuminates quite well, and it has a matching rear light here at the back that also lights up nicely. You get a small luggage rack if you want, but usually they write on it how much weight it can carry. This time that's missing, so I'd say, in my opinion, the maximum is 25 kilograms. And then there's the seat here, which is a bit better than in last year's series. Maybe it's not quite as soft, which actually isn't a problem at all in the long run. So that's what the bike actually offers you. And by the way, it really does have a load capacity of 120 kilos, which is honestly quite impressive. And to be honest, so far I'd say there's absolutely nothing wrong with it at all. In fact, I have to say, this little reflective insert here on the rim is especially really cute. We're talking about a bike with a truly lovable shape and a beautifully refined appearance, which is, well, typically a city bike. Now let me tell you what it's like to ride it. Before I tell you how it rides, let me tell you how I assembled it. Obviously it comes in a relatively large box, as you might expect. Since we're talking about a 24 kilos bike, that's quite a lot. And of course we have to put on the front wheel ourselves, and the handlebar, which we also have to carefully attach. The 2 pedals, 1 for each side, and the luggage rack as well, which needs to be secured. But honestly, it's not really complicated. In fact, what's more annoying is that sometimes the tool they provide doesn't seem perfectly ideal. But if you've assembled a bike before, you probably have your own tools at home. For example, to attach the front fender and the light here, you need screws that turn in opposite directions, but you only have one Allen key for this. So either you have another one at home or you try to hold it by hand, which in this respect, as you can see, it's not perfect. but you can assemble it in a relatively short time. You need to inflate the tires, check if the gears are adjusted, and of course make sure the brakes are working. And after that, the thing is ready to ride. Now with a charger, it takes approximately 10 hours to fully charge this 10.4 amp hour battery using the included charger. Honestly, my very first personal experience with this whole thing is that the promised pedal assist range, which is said to be between 70 to 90 kilometers. I think it definitely reaches 70, but I wouldn't swear to the 90, though of course it also depends on how heavy you are. And obviously, with a 60-kilo girl riding it, you might actually get the full 90 kilometers out of it. But it delivers the torque in a very pleasant way because, as you know, this is torque sensor based, which means that the harder you pedal, the more it assists you. If we just hang around here, then he adds relatively little. So for example, on flat roads, once we've reached a normal cruising speed that we want to maintain, the motor doesn't really do much work. But you still don't feel like pedaling is hard. And of course, it's extremely efficient in terms of power consumption. So this is absolutely an advantage of the torque sensor. And the mid-drive motor also has the advantage that here, the driven or assisted part is right here, and not the rear hub, which is actually a bit more gentle and forgiving on the chain and its links compared to other mechanisms. And for example, one observation I have is that, generally speaking, if you're operating on mostly flat terrain, you really won't be shifting gears very much at all. Simply because if you set it to the very lowest possible gear, you can easily maintain that steady 25 kilometers per hour speed at a completely normal, comfortable pedaling pace, without having to exert yourself or push harder than usual, which is the limit the pedal assist is active. Because if you go faster than 25 kilometers per hour, the pedal assist automatically turns off, since this is an EU regulation that up to that speed you can legally sell such a bike as a pedal assist bicycle. There's no throttle on it, so it fully complies with all regulations. In other words, this is a typical e-bike, specifically a pedal assist e-bike. You'll still end up using the gears when you start going uphill somewhere, because if the road gets steeper, then it's really truly worth shifting to a higher gear. So it's just a bit easier and more comfortable for you, and you'll also feel the motor's assistance even more as you ride. But I absolutely and definitely want to point out that, just to be clear, this 64 Newton meters and 250 watts of power won't climb the hills for you. So it will help you, that's clear, but it's not like you'll be able to just pedal along comfortably with your feet barely moving and the bike doing all the work. In those situations, you'll still need to put in effort yourself to reach your destination. I have to say that, for example, in a mountainous environment like this, especially when you find yourself on the steeper streets, I really noticed that, well, I do exercise too, and I consider myself fairly active. So my heart rate did go up as I was walking, but it was never to the point where I felt like I couldn't do it or that it was too much for me to handle. So if you're really feeling extremely tired, running very low on energy, and you just can't go on any further, then simply switch to the highest assist level. You'll move slowly, but you'll definitely, absolutely feel the motor helping you out. So just to briefly sum things up for you here. As you can quite clearly see, this really isn't exactly the most affordable or cheapest bicycle available out there. Obviously, the reason for that is, on one hand, it has hydraulic brakes, and on the other hand, it gives the impression of a well-crafted, nicely welded and well-assembled bike. This is a higher quality product compared to those really low-end Chinese items. You see, it has a torque sensor, which is a much more expensive solution, and it has a mid-drive motor, which is also not a cheap option. So if you're asking whether this price of 1,370 euros or 1,270 euros with a coupon code is worth it, then I'd say, looking at the offerings from other electric bike manufacturers, the truth is these things simply aren't going to get any cheaper. The days are absolutely and completely gone when you could actually get a decent electric bike for just 800 or 900 euros, at least decent compared to that price level. For 800, 900 euros now, you're only getting the very entry-level models with pedal sensors and standard brakes, and in many cases you're actually getting a somewhat lower quality, less reliable bike overall. The OneSport, however, represents a noticeably higher standard than that, offering a bit more in terms of quality and craftsmanship. So if you take a look at, say, Engwe's lineup, or perhaps Eleglide's lineup, or the offerings of other manufacturers who also make torque sensor bicycles, then you'll see that in reality this $1,370 price from OneSport is in fact not at all excessive compared to the others. I was just talking to the people at Engwe as well about possibly sending a bike for testing, and a very similar model from them is actually somewhat more expensive. So the situation is, what I can say is that we have to accept that this is how much these cost. But of course the question is, if it already has a mid-drive motor and hydraulic brakes, and you're looking for a bike with a really decent battery range, is it still worth ordering it from China? Or have Chinese bikes now reached a price level where you'd pay about the same amount for them in Hungary as well? However, if you take a closer look at the prices in various large and well-known sports stores, you'll notice that unfortunately their prices have also gone up recently. So there is still a noticeable price advantage for bicycles that are shipped here from China, simply because for the same amount of money, at least technically speaking, they generally offer just a bit more overall. Then of course the question is how the support works and how warranty issues are handled. But since this bike is built from Bafang parts and Shimano parts, it's actually relatively straightforward and quite easy to find spare parts for it, especially when you need them. Also, OneSport didn't just start out in this business today. They've been on the market for quite some time now. And at least in my experience, if there's a problem, Eric and his team handle these things quite reasonably and efficiently. And you can easily order all kinds of spare parts, including various components and accessories for OneSport bikes as well. So that's all you need to know about the OT07. And the coupon code is right there in the description below right now. And if you have any questions about the bike, feel free to ask. Basically, I have had good experiences myself. To be honest, at my age, I would actually honestly appreciate a slightly more powerful motor. But of course, the 250-watt output is a requirement in a lot of EU countries. Here in Hungary, it can be a bit higher. So I would gladly try out, say, for example, an electric bike with a 350-watt motor and about 80 Newton meters of torque with a very similar torque sensor and mid-drive motor, because it's possible that for me, personally, life would be more comfortable with that, but there's nothing wrong with this one either, as long as you don't have to go up really steep places. Then it's more than enough for, average city commuting. I'd even say it's absolutely suitable for commuting from the suburbs as well. But this is a standalone bike, so it's not foldable. You can't just put it in your car. This is a normal, traditional, urban, and classic design, well-balanced, OneSport bicycle, thoughtfully crafted for everyday use. Well, let's consider that the final word. If you still have any questions, feel free to ask, and I'll do my best to answer them in the comments. And if you'd like to watch more similar videos on this channel, because it looks like there will be bikes and scooters again from now on, since it's spring, then don't forget to click the appropriate button that pops up around me, so you won't miss any of the upcoming content either. Thank you for watching. Bye, everyone.